The U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill today which would require child-proof packaging e-cigarettes and the liquid that goes with them. More than 3,000 people reported e-cigarette and liquid nicotine poisonings in 2015. That's up more than tenfold from only 5 years ago. According to the American Association of Poison Control Centers, more than half of the reported calls in 2014 were for children under the age of 13.
And really, it's not surprising because e-cigarettes and liquid nicotine are being sold in colorful packaging and sweet flavors like gummy bear and Skittles.
The bill has already made its way through the Senate. It will now head to the President's desk.
The U.S. House gaveling in next for 9 suspension bills, including one to strengthen sanctions against North Korea. This coming a week after North Korea reportedly testing a hydrogen bomb. Live House coverage here now on C-SPAN.
Record votes on postponed questions will be taken later. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill S-142.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 142, an act to require special packaging for liquid nicotine containers and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlewoman from Indiana, Mrs. Brooks, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Sarbanes, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Indiana.
I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous materials in the record on the bill.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Recently, there's been a significant amount of debate surrounding liquid nicotine, ranging from its use as cigarette cessation to its use in public spaces. While there are differing points on the future of vaping, everyone can agree on the need to prevent the product from inadvertently reaching the hands of children. That's why my colleague from Connecticut, Mrs. Esty, and I introduced the Child Nicotine Poisoning Prevention Act, which simply requires child safety packaging be added to liquid nicotine containers. The bill we're considering today, and already passed in the Senate, is identical to our bill, which passed out of the Energy and Commerce Committee in October of last year. Liquid nicotine, the product that is used in vaping pipes, is getting into the hands of children at a startling rate. I witnessed this firsthand when I had the opportunity to visit the Indiana Poison Control Centers last year. Their director, Dr. Jim Mowry, shared with me that exposures to e-cigarettes in Indiana alone have increased 8-fold from 2011 to 2014. The numbers nationwide are even more startling, with poison control centers across the country showing a 14-fold increase in exposure to e-cigarettes from 271 cases in 2011 to just under 4,000 cases in 2014. Attracted by flavors like Skittles and Apple Jacks, curious children often are tempted to taste this liquid. Unfortunately, a single teaspoon of this liquid can be deadly to a child if it is either ingested or absorbed through their skin. Since there are no safety packaging requirements currently under federal law, children aren't hindered in any way from their access to this potentially lethal product. With vaping becoming even more popular across the country and an estimated 36% of e-cigarette users not locking up bottles of liquid nicotine or using childproof caps, I fear these calls to the poison control centers will only continue to rise. And that's why the bill in front of us today is so important. Very simply, it solves the problem that we have by applying existing childproof requirements found in the Poison Prevention Act to liquid nicotine. We shield our children from hazardous products. Liquid nicotine should be no exception. Now, I know that the FDA plans to also regulate in this space, and some have expressed worry about overlapping regulations that this bill might impose. I'm hopeful that the savings clause that we added to the bill will allay the fears of those skeptics, since it explicitly allows the FDA to continue the regulatory authority. There's a significant amount of debate about the FDA's authority in this area and when they will act. Regardless, the FDA hasn't even produced a proposed rule. Yet, a final rule will likely not be finalized for over a year. And that's a year of more calls to poison control centers across the country, and a year of kids needlessly exposed to an easily preventable danger. So I say let's solve the problem right now by passing this legislation and sending it to the President's desk today. In closing, I want to express my thanks to my colleague, Ms. Esty from Connecticut. This is something that I know that she has worked on for quite some time, and for helping spearhead this effort and helping us craft a bill that will protect children for generations to come. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support S-142, the Child Nicotine Poisoning Prevention Act, which would protect children from exposure to liquid nicotine. Liquid nicotine comes in a variety of flavors, like orange, grape, bubble gum, and cotton candy that appeal to kids. And many of these liquid nicotine products are easily accessible by children for contact and consumption. At this time, there is no existing standard to protect against accidental poisoning. The threat of poisoning is not an imagined threat. About a year ago, the first American victim, a 1-year-old, died from liquid nicotine poisoning. The number of calls to poison control centers about liquid nicotine continues to rise, and more than half of those reported exposures occurred in children under 6 years of age. This bill, as you heard, takes the common sense step of directing the Consumer Product Safety Commission to limit the risks of child liquid nicotine poisoning by requiring special packaging for liquid nicotine containers. At the same time, it allows the Food and Drug Administration to continue with its rules on tobacco products, including the requirement for child-proof packaging of liquid nicotine. FDA's authority to do so is clear, and I strongly encourage the Office of Management and Budget to finish its review of the tobacco rules so they can go into effect quickly. I hope and expect this will be widely supported in the House as it was in the Senate. I want to salute Representative Brooks, and I also want to thank, as she did, Representative Elizabeth Esty for her important leadership on this critical issue and for working across the aisle from the outset to advance this bill. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlelady from Indiana is recognized.
I reserve my time.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield now to Congresswoman Esty as much time as she may consume.
The gentlelady is recognized for as much time as she may consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the Child Nicotine Poisoning Prevention Act. Along with Senator Nelson, I proudly introduced the Child Nicotine Prevention Act last year, and this year it's been my real pleasure to work with my good friend Susan Brooks, and I'd like to thank her as well as Representative Schakowsky, Representative Sarbanes, Chairman Upton, and Ranking Member Pallone, and all of the staff for their help in this common sense, important, literally life-saving legislation that I hope we will pass today and put on the President's desk tonight. As a mom, I can only imagine the pain felt by a parent whose child has been poisoned by a substance that so far the federal government has done nothing to protect their children from. It's understandable that children are attracted by the liquid nicotine that is being sold right now through e-cigarettes. The packages are brightly colored, they look like candy, they have flavors like strawberry, gummy bears, cotton candy, peppermint, chocolate, and the packaging, once you open the packages, smells like candy. It's not surprising, particularly at the holidays, that children who are seeing brightly colored food flavorings and dyeing cookies and making them bright colors would be curious. They smell it, they want to taste it. And just a little over a year ago, a young child died, a 2-year-old died in New York from ingesting this. Even a small bottle of liquid nicotine has enough poison to kill 4 small children. So I am so grateful to my friends today to have joined us on both sides of the aisle to reduce the risk of those poisoning by doing the simple packaging that we're all familiar with. Those plastic wrappings that are on every bottle of eye drops, every bottle of contact lens solution, and on all poisons and common household products that we know could endanger an adult. But here we're talking about children, and they deserve our protection. Liquid nicotine, which is just as dangerous, deserves to have that packaging. This bipartisan legislation will require that all liquid nicotine quantities be child-proofed. It's a simple common sense measure. It will save lives. And so I ask that all of our colleagues support this legislation today, ensure that liquid nicotine packaging in all sizes and shapes and colors and flavors be child-proofed. We have worked very hard to ensure that we are working within the FDA's authority, giving them time to develop final rules. But frankly, we've already waited. We've already waited over a year. We've already had a death in the last year, a huge increase in the number of calls to poison centers. So it is past time for us to act. So again, I want to thank my colleagues, particularly the chairman and Susan Brooks, for their leadership. Urge my colleagues to join us today, get this on the President's desk for signature, and get our children protected from the dangers of liquid nicotine. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Maryland.
I'll reserve unless there are no other speakers on the other side and the Congresswoman is prepared to yield back.
The gentlelady from Indiana.
Yes, we have no other speakers.
Yes, sir.
We'll yield back the
Gentleman
balance
from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'll yield back the balance of our time and urge support of this important bill.
The gentleman yields. The gentlelady from Indiana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to commend also, as Mrs. Esty eloquently stated, our colleagues on Energy and Commerce saw the importance of this. I want to thank Mr. Sarbanes and our chairman and the ranking member for moving on this common sense legislation, and thank you, Ms. Esty, for being a champion of the child liquid nicotine bill, and I urge all my colleagues to support this bill this evening. Yield back.
The gentlelady yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate S-142? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.